So can I just have an opening question? What was the genesis behind this? What sparked your interest in this topic?
Well, this is a topic, and Susan, I'm going to let you weigh in here as well, because this is Susan. Susan does workshops with us once and twice a month, every month, and we've been doing this for close to a decade now.
Yeah, we have, which is amazing.
Actually, it's over a decade now.
It's been a long time.
Started in 2009.
It started, I think, right before you
For 11 years.
From you had your party at her house.
Right. And so every time she does her workshop, it's usually about an artist or about a topic. And there was once, probably about 2 years ago now, we did a workshop. We did a thing on spirituality and art. And she did a really great job of discussion. We had a video, we looked at it, we talked about it, we talked about different artists, and we opened up for discussion and just kind of talked for a long time. I went to a new place personally, not even in my art, but just me personally. It just took me to a place of, it actually kind of answered some things that I've been seeking for a long time. Why am I painting? What am I painting? What am I trying to do with my art? Does my art really express who I am as a person? Is art meant to be that tool? And so it really opened up a lot of questions, but there were questions I was seeking anyway. And so, I think everyone really got into the topic matter that day. And Susan, please speak up about it, because it was a great workshop.
So that sounds very existential to me. I mean, because what I was hearing you say is, what does all this mean? What am I doing? What does it mean? And that's existentialism. And that is one of the languages of spirituality. It has many.
And I welcome you to expand on that.
Sure. Well, existentialism is that element of human spiritual experience. And let's be frank, this is all about definitions here. We could all define spirituality probably in ways similar and in ways different. But one of the unifying threads across human spiritual experience is what's called existentialism. And that is, what is all this and how does it make sense? What does it mean to me? What is my response to it? And how do I know that? Those are existential elements of the human spirit, trying to figure out what it all means in time and place, context. And so if you look, I said at a Harvard conference a few years ago, and listened to Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Jews, Unitarians, there was even an Amish representative there. And that was the common thread across every one of their presentations. What does it mean? And how do we interpret it?
Right.
And to the extent that you develop a language, a spiritual language to answer that question, some people's language develops artistically. You can't tell me that Michelangelo didn't have a spiritual voice behind his art.
Oh, he was just commissioned.
Well, he was also gay. But there's so many elements. Wouldn't you agree, Mike? That so many elements to so many. Michelangelo, Glen, yeah. The church supported the artists in the Renaissance, right? The government, the Medici. They wouldn't have been able to develop the way they did if they hadn't had that particular patronage, right? But each artist did painting, like Raphael painting the Madonnas, right? Or for Angelica, not Angelica. Anyway, this was central to their soul. For some of them, for others like Michelangelo, I don't know. His own
But you have to remember that the patronage steered the kind of art they did.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean. It really did.
Right.
And yet we know that Michelangelo, who was supposed to be working on Julian's tomb for like 100 years, was developing this whole idea on his own, you know, but informed by what was central to their lives.
The church.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this case, that religion, but there are other elements to it. It's not just.
Well, and to the extent that I think you're absolutely right, I'll make clear one of my basic assumptions is that you can be spiritual and not religious.
Right.
Always.
Absolutely.
Right.
You can be spiritual and be atheist.
Yeah, that's a given.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I know that in saying that to some people, in my circle, it would probably make their head explode to say that. But it's the truth.
Well, it is the truth.
It is absolutely the truth. And at that same Harvard conference, I remember a Muslim scholar from Cairo. In broken English, he looked at the audience and he said, "Folks, we are just hardwired for this."
Right. Right.
We're hardwired for
Right.
this.
So I'm going to ask you a question here. So we started off this, and I sent out a little blurb to all of you saying, what does it, and you've hit on so much of this, Mike, what is it? What does it look like? Spirituality and art, of course, is what we're talking about. What does it represent? And most importantly, what should be the intentionality of us as artists, or also the viewer, seeking to represent spiritualism in their own voice of creation, and how do you bring that voice forward? Okay? So there's a couple of quotes from Kandinsky that I've kind of found out thought would be a good way to start this off today. One of his quotes is, "There is no must in art because art is free." Okay? And, you know, we're a free will and free soul as well. So I'm like, that all plays very well together. The artist must not train only his eye, but also his soul.
I push back against the masculine reference there.
Well,
It's Candy. We have to give him.
and even that was translated.
Sure.
Well, then there's that, right?
So you there. So I want to hear from each one of you. So what about this topic about spirituality and art inspired you to be here today? And I want to hear from each of you.
I'll jump in there. Of course, you invited me, and I appreciate it always.
Sure. But you could easily said, thanks, but I got other things to do.
But this one really spoke to me because, like you said, for me, my art is about the intangible things that are about us, and we don't really know what those things are until we go in. So we go inside and figure out those components. Till we go inside and figure out the blueprints of what makes us. And those questions come up. They just kind of come up, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, in this process, maybe you're asking questions about the colors or the lines, but gradually it becomes a practice. So maybe you're not painting, but you're driving, and you're just asking yourself these questions. And those questions are the doorway to the spirit, to understanding who you are. And so that's kind of where I am in terms of tinkering around with that. So that's why I'm.
Gotcha. Thank you. Sherelle?
I don't know.
He lives here.
Yeah, he got forced into it. No.
I don't know. You know, I guess just from the last few minutes of hearing y'all talk about it, I think that, you know, it's sort of like, especially in today's chaotic society and world events. I mean, I try to look at the polar opposites, the absolute worst, which is where we are and how things are developing across this country and other countries. And then I try to think of, well, what's something that we all universally share in common.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you wave at somebody in America, we all know what that is, and other countries know what that is, and the smile, that's a universal emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you couple spirituality on whatever level with art, it becomes also universal. It's a universal acceptance. So it's almost like it's a subculture, that everybody gets it. Because we all have our own unique, special way of doing our art.
Right.
And no one of us are alike, so that, but yet we all fall under that same universal umbrella. So.
I get it. Thank you.
I had an absolute moment of clarity about this
Mm.
when I was on faculty at Georgetown in DC. There was an exhibition at the National Gallery of Rembrandt.
Mm.
And I spent the entire day just sitting in front of one painting after another and just lingering. And at the end of it, I've always been drawn to Rembrandt, but I figured out why. Because he depicts illumination. He depicts control of light.
Mm-hmm.
I think better than any of the realists, sort of painters. And in each of his paintings, the central theme was the light. The subject matter took form because of the light that he introduced. That's metaphor for me. That's a spiritual metaphor for me, because much of my personal spirituality is about seeking my own illumination, whatever that looks like. And the light is very critical to that. So as soon as I saw Rembrandt, I saw someone who was saying what I was thinking.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Y'all gotta go see Rembrandt.
Oh,
and I know exactly what you're saying. From my earlier recollections, I remember Rembrandt and in the light. I remember the one with he paints the mirror image, and there's the light right there. I remember that. This is when I was in high school. I remember that.
That's Vermeer. I think you're thinking of Vermeer.
Maybe.
Vermeer, who also deals with light, in
a big way.
But he had the mirror. They think now, right?
But
But it's a
I'm just
similar
saying,
thing.
right,
It's
yeah.
not,
Right.
So to illustrate that painting right there.
It's all about the light.
Where's the light? I mean, dead
center.
I mean, that piece is illuminated from its center, and that's what drew me to that piece. It's from the 1850s. I don't know. It is signed somewhere on there.
Which is funny, because that breaks all the rules of art, but it works.
And I think it's Flemish. Because I think I looked in there and found an insect, in which the Flemish painters would paint an insect to depict imperfection. But I was drawn because of the light construction in that simple still life.
Very cool. Susan.
No, Geppe. Geppe's next.
Oh, Geppe, you go.
Well,
What drew you here today? You could have been in your studio painting all that.
well, I just, listening to everybody talk about spirituality, you said it right. All of us probably has a different, way of describing spirituality. It's not that I'm differing a lot from what I'm hearing here, but for me, spirituality is more like a personal process and transition. That the way I look at it is that one of the things that I found interesting meeting today was, because the type of person I am, spirituality is an experience that would take me to the next level in my personal existence, right? So I'm meeting with people, talking about different topics. That is, for me, spirituality. That's the way I look at it. By me saying that is, I'm extremely interested in what people have to say about different topics. That's how I inspire myself with my art. I don't have a clear or a standard definition of spirituality. I try to walk away from that, and I kind of describe that more as a personal process that I need in my life to continue producing art. And then, so how I get it is just by doing this, meeting with people. We talk about different pieces of art, and I'm the type of person that I look at a piece of art and I'm thinking, well, today I'm seeing the light, like you see it right there. But depending on how I feel internally, can see probably the light one day is coming from another angle. So that's what I do when I go to exhibitions. When you talk about Michelangelo, we're talking about the Renaissance period, where the religion was extremely an influence back in the days. But when you see a piece of Michelangelo that was unfinished, and how long it took him to even process that, you see even back in those ancient times that this man was also a person of his own. He was able to say, I'm not finishing, I'm not done, and that is okay, even though if he had a patron to do so. So that for me is a definition of spirituality, being your own person in the process. So that is the way I describe my art. And then it happens, I mean, honestly, it just, sometimes, you hang a piece of art in one place and then you move it to another place and you feel different.
Yeah.
That is for me spirituality. I need that in my life. That constant transition that is going to take me to the next level for me to become a better person and become a better artist within myself first. So that's why for me, it's just the way I describe it. I think this is great that we're doing this because I think it's a way for me to kind of, hear what we all have to say, and and I would take, I mean, I don't mean to sound selfish, but I would take what I need, for me to take my personal process to the next level, which I describe, that's, you want to put a name on it, that's what for me, it's spirituality.
So what I'm hearing you say is it's very individualistic, it's experiential,
Yeah.
and there's an element to it that's relational. That is relational. You like
Yeah,
to be with other people
totally.
to talk about it.
Totally.
So
Interaction.
and that reinforces the belief that art, like spirituality, are both sensual experiences.
Yeah.
People don't think of spirituality as a sensual experience.
Now, what do you mean by sensual experience?
And I don't mean that in a Freudian context. I mean that because spirituality, like art, can consume all of your senses. Sight, sound, smell. It can be that depth of experience.
Sure.
And that's the experience that I had with Rembrandt. It was sensual. Absolutely sensual.
If I may add to this, it's probably going to sound like a standard term, but we are artists, we're visual people. I'm a visual person, describe myself as so, right? So I have been in situations where I'm looking at a piece of artwork. You talk about senses, right? And I can place myself in the scene and find a scent in it. It's totally up to me how I want to interact with that piece of art. And I've seen it in many places. Here in the US, in Europe, which is one of my favorite places for me to go and see art, because I always believe that art should be a mean of unity, and that's the way I describe it, regardless of the tendencies that we have. But it's really interesting to me when I'm in front of something and thinking, I'm smelling something here because I'm putting myself in the scene. So every time when I'm able to trigger one of my senses when I look at a piece of art. That is, for me, so important. And that, I don't know if that actually we can describe that spiritually. I don't think so. But that's how I interact.
But it is sensual. I mean, it's definitely sensual. That's for sure.
I can do that. I can even feel sometimes it just depends on how I place myself with it. It might sound a little bit complex, but that's how I enjoy that. And I don't. Sometimes for me, it's just looking at a piece of art and that kind of, identifying the period, identifying the tendency. It is important, but it's not as important as, how I'm feeling it, how I'm placing myself in it. So, I mean, like when I look at these two pieces of Michelangelo, when 2 or 3 figures were missing, just because that was that way, and you are able to place yourself within that image, replacing one of those empty figures there, that's for me is powerful.
Absolutely.
Powerful. I mean, when you look at a real piece of work of Michelangelo, you think that this man was able, despite of all the tendencies, to say, I'm not done. And I don't think I'm ready. Back in those days when having a patron and saying, listen, and you're able to stand for yourself and what you believed, that's pretty powerful. I take that as an inspiration.
Sure.
For me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Susan, why are you here today? Yeah. Exactly right.
That just spoke to me on so many. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, you articulated the things that I have a hard time articulating. Well, this was very exciting to me because as an artist, I'm pretty clueless as far as, I don't think about these things, right? For me,
Intentionally.
Right.
Right.
It's the process. For me, it's always been the process. It's always about being in it, being in this, whatever is developing. And as I've developed as an artist, I've realized things about myself. We have these, revelations for me, as far as I don't do well when I'm trying to do art the way people say you should, right? And I'm not talking about learning technique, but just subject matter, for instance. So, for me, the idea of spirituality in my art in art, is finding those answers to those questions. Why do I do this? Why is it important for me to do this? And for many cultural reasons, art is diminished, I think, often in our particular culture. Not so much in European culture, Western European, or in Asian, Eastern cultures, where art is revered. Not necessarily, it's not about the artist, although some artists can, but the art itself and what it says and what it represents for the culture, and those things are taken very seriously and revered. Here, I don't think that we're old enough yet. I don't think we got it yet. We haven't really, we don't understand what art is about. And I would like for myself to have a reason why this is valuable, why we should do it. It was a more pressing question for me when I was younger, than it is now that I'm older. Because now I think that it's okay now. I don't need to worry so much about what other people think about what you're doing, right? But it's about the process, and that what Geppe was saying too about this community, it's just being able to listen to what other people, other artists have to say, their insight into their work. Studying more, one of the joyful things for me has been studying these other artists and being able to talk about them with the class and seeing how we can all relate to it and learn from their particular art and their techniques. But when you were talking, Michael, and I've been to the National Gallery and I've had experience there, and Geppe, when he was talking about Michelangelo, and I've been really lucky to have a couple of really amazing experiences somewhat recently in that same way. And art always made me happy. It made me joyful. I loved being at the museum. I loved it. It was just, it was a sensual, all-consuming experience. I could walk around a corner in San Francisco and see demon corns on the wall and just go, oh my God, it's demon corn, and just like revel in this stuff, right?
You talk about going to the Phillips and seeing Rothko.
Going to
And
the
being in a
Phillips
room
and
with
seeing
full
Rothko in that room.
And
just
all the vibrations that came off those walls.
being in Bruges and
My
going to
favorite
the
Rothko
cathedral
too.
and seeing the Madonna, the Bruges Madonna, Michelangelo's Madonna. There aren't any words. I could not explain that in a million years. And we were lucky because it was November and it was cold and there wasn't hardly anybody there. And so it was quiet. And we stood there, I don't even know how long. It was just overwhelming. And that idea, all of this washes over you. How he did it, he made that. He, and for me, it's very difficult to articulate some of these things. And the other thing was, and this was seeing Elaine de Kooning at the National Gallery, this wonderful exhibition that they had of hers, and then being in Ghent and going, the museum, it was in the newspaper that was in the hotel, and it said that they had an exhibition of Gerhard Richter. And so we walked up to the museum, and I'd just done this, just gotten familiar with him. I'd seen him at the Phillips. Sonia loves him. And it was the kind of experience that is spiritual. It was a spiritual experience.
Sorry,
Being in that room, being in that with all those paintings, with all that energy, it's good, boy. And that to me is what spirituality and art is. I can't associate it with religion, right?
Don't have to.
Or with what, or even with subject or anything.
Nope.
But again, a common theme, you said the light, you said energy.
It is, right.
It's the
It
same.
is.
It's the same.
And this is just one more thing in all the reading I've been doing, because there's a common theme, and Glen and I were just talking about it this morning, this thread. There's a thread in everybody that I managed to read.
And she's brought all of her library with her. So
Well,
we
not
can
all of
read
it,
all day long.
very little, really, but because they were just such great quotes, right? But they're all of the piece. All of these artists that are in the same track, and so is Kandinsky.
They get it.
That it's
Universal.
It's important.
Yeah.
the process. It's
It's a process.
it's finding that energy. It's finding that. Anyway,
Yep.
I can read them. They're in there.
Can I ask a question? I'm not an artist.
Well, that, I, see, I,
in
you're
the
not a
classical
visual
definitional
artist,
sense.
right? Yeah, you're not a visual
Um,
artist.
I think that art, hold on a minute, because I was gonna say this, I think that art comes in so many more
Of course it
forms than.
That's why I said in the
how-
traditional definition. That's why I said traditional
Your
definition.
artwork, for an example, in gardening, is
Mm-hmm.
off the chart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Well,
Yes.
I think we're all creative, but we're not all necessarily artistic.
Well,
And artistic is
that's a
in the behind
definition.
the beholder, right? I have a question because a friend of mine who is an artist who is a potter and quite good returned recently from Santa Fe and said that she's transformed. And she said two things that are haunting to me. The first I understand because of my first comment. She said, "I've never seen light like that. I've never appreciated color until I saw it in that light form." Secondly, and this is what haunts
We
me.
had
and
somebody
this-
else that went out there and painted for a few years.
and this is my question. This is my question to you who do art for a living. She said she came back from Santa Fe and realized that she approached her art with the wrong language.
I think that's part of this discussion today.
Yeah.
So
Me too.
that's my question. What does that mean when an artist says that they have a language?
We're going to come to that.
Okay.
Here we
Okay.
are. Hold that question.
That was a
'Cause it
spooky
is the
observation.
question.
That was a spooky thing for me to
It
hear.
is the question.
If I may actually say something real quick.
Sure.
You talk about being artistic and not being artistic, right? One of the things that I do and I truly admire from painters from ancient times is that the word of being artistic was not even in their language. You had artists like Michelangelo that was actually, I think, pretty much into astrology. You had another artist, I think, a physicist, whatever that is, right? Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, drew all that.
So these folks were people that they actually had a very common and traditional life, right? And they were artists, but they did not call themselves artistic because they saw art as being spontaneous, something that, I do argue the fact when you said that you're not artistic, with all my respect to you, I refute that because I think everybody has the ability to be artistic if we want to put a name on it to that. It is like Shannon was saying, how you express yourself artistically is different than being artistic. And that's another word that me as an artist try to step away because I have found that putting labels on things, in my personal experience as an artist, is kind of keeps me from developing myself internally.
It limits you.
Yeah, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
That's not what I want to do as an artist. So, and let's study the folks, and you see that how much of a regular life they had, and then they never called themselves being artistic. They were into so many different fields, but they created wonderful pieces of art. Some of them, I think Michelangelo only produced 12 pieces, I think. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I am, I'm going to have to correct myself later, but I believe Michelangelo only 12 pieces, I think. 12, 13 pieces.
But then you have
Master-
Picasso who did
masterwork.
1,200,000 pieces.
Exactly.
But
And they're still finding it.
They're still finding it.
Designed all of the
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 16, yeah,
walls and
yeah.
the cabinet and stuff to defend
Yeah.
Florence
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, and you think,
Munitions
you
design.
think about things like that. It's really
Yeah.
interesting. I think it's just one of the things that that I would like to see probably movement is just the fact that the more we put labels on things, the more we refrain ourselves for being authentic. And that comes to in every aspect of life.
Which is really interesting because my next question really was going to be, at what level do you see yourself as a participant in art? Right?
Yeah, and
As a participant.
kind of goes with what that, but also what Geppe. here
Exactly,
again,
yes. But also what
this-
Michael was
but
saying.
See, right.
That
But
I don't
see
see
what
myself as an
Geppe-
artist.
that-
Yes, but you are.
But
But I'm a
Well,
consumer.
you
I'm a
participate.
consumer.
You
I-
it's the
participate.
language that you
Participate.
use. Glen knows this about me, but I so agree with Geppe that when you start labeling stuff, right? That person is artistic. You're an artist.
You paint.
Right? What? Yeah.
You're a musical
That-
performer. You're a...
And it goes back
Dancer.
to what I was, that
You're a
really
poet.
does disturb me in our own culture, is that we don't take art seriously because we see it as other than something that's productive in our society. Whereas what Geppe was pointing out is that these artists, Leonardo, Michelangelo, all of them, you know,
Galileo was an
all these
artist.
guys, right, you know.
Well, sure.
I mean,
But
the-
that matter, yeah.
but
Scientist
they
and
were-
artist and
they
everything
had a
else along
normal-
with it.
They lived their life in their society, in their culture. They were a part of. They were not separate from.
Yeah.
Whereas I believe that in our society we see artists as separate from. Artists
A
are,
special group of people.
yeah, they're different. We're
Why?
different. We're
Why?
different people. We're different.
I think so.
Yeah, keep going.
Because I think it's related to our conversation. We're purposeful. Artists are purposeful and intentional.
You have to be.
About having
You
these
have to be.
conversations. About going inside. About finding the light. About everything that we just discussed. Is about the intentionality of it all, and that's what separates us from everybody else. So it makes people say you're weird, or you're different, or there's something about you. That's because we take the time as artists to see what those kinds of things are. And as we begin to understand it and feel it, we're able to cultivate it. And then that in turn starts to spread and share that energy and that light. And I think that's part of the spirituality of it.
But we
as
shouldn't
far as...
be other than. We should be part of that community.
Yeah,
like-
and to your point, and I think a lot of times that comes up because
Yeah, absolutely.
an artist's life is very isolating. Right? You really have to kind of go inward and inward. If you really want to get into the process and, it's just me and this canvas and we're going to duke it out to the bloody end, whatever that might look like, you do that in isolation most of the time. Now I'm very, very hugely fortunate and blessed that I've got a group that I paint with practically every weekend. I get so much energy from that community of being an artist because we're there to support each other. It's like, oh shit, that ain't working, and we